Good morning and welcome to Kitsap Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. Whoever you are and wherever you come from, for this hour we are here, one gathered congregation, and all are welcome. I invite you to follow along in the order of service. For those of you attending virtually, all the links for this service, including the order of service, are on our website and in this morning's worship email. If you're here in the sanctuary this morning, please silence your cell phone. I remember when I was lay leading for the first time, and in the middle of things, my cell phone went off, and it was way back there. It was really embarrassing. So may my embarrassment serve as your reminder. My name is Lisa Johnson. My husband, Mac, and I have been members for several decades now, and our social life and our lifelong friends, so many of them come from this beloved community. I'm so grateful for Kitsap Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. Our worship leader this morning is the Reverend Carol McKinley. Reverend Carol is KUUF's current bridge minister and serves on the Healthy Congregations team for the Pacific Western region of the UUA. And we have been so blessed with her presence with us for this time while we wait for our new minister. The announcements are available on our website, www.kuuf.org, or in our weekly email newsletter, The Candle. We acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the Aboriginal territory of the Suquamish people. Expert fishermen, canoe builders, and basket weavers, the Suquamish live in harmony with the lands and waterways along Washington's Central Salish Sea, as they have for thousands of years. Here the Suquamish live and protect the land and waters of their ancestors for future generations, as promised by the Point Elliott Treaty of 1855. Please stand as you're willing and able to sing our musical call to worship, hymn number 1001 in the Teal Hymnal, Breaths, performed by Brian Kinney.
Listen more often to things than to beings. Listen more often to things than to beings. 'Tis the ancestors' breath when the fire's voice is heard. 'Tis the ancestors' breath in the voice of the waters. Those who have died have never, never left. The dead are not under the earth. They are in the rustling trees. They are in the groaning woods. They are in the crying grass. They are in the moaning rocks. The dead are not under the earth. So listen more often to things than to beings. Listen more often to things than to beings. 'Tis the ancestors' breath when the fire's voice is heard. 'Tis the ancestors' breath in the voice of the waters. Those who have died have never, never left. The dead have a pact with the living. They are in the woman's breast. They are in the wailing child. They are with us in our homes. They are with us in this crowd. The dead have a pact with the living. So voice is heard. 'Tis the ancestors' breath in the voice of the waters.
That was lovely. Our opening words are from Mary Oliver, Praying. It doesn't have to be the blue iris. It could be weeds in a vacant lot or a few small stones. Just pay attention, then patch a few words together and don't try to make them elaborate. This isn't a contest, but the doorway into thanks and a silence in which another voice may speak. Let us light our chalices together now with these words adapted from those of the Reverend Erica Hewitt. We light this chalice, symbol of all that we are, all that we have done together, and all that we will be as our shared ministry encourages those within and beyond our walls. With full hearts, we affirm our relationships with one another, recognizing our connective power and accepting our responsibility to be bold and courageous. Now please join me in the spoken affirmation. The words will appear on the screen. We gather as a caring community, seeking life's deeper meanings. We value diversity and the worth of all living things. We strive to speak truth in love, to act for justice, to grow in spirit, and to care for the earth. We celebrate with open hearts and minds the creative power that sustains and transforms us. Now, Melinda Hughes, our Director of Religious Education, will share our worship for all ages.
Good morning, everyone. So some of you might recognize this story because I told it earlier in the year, but we all know a good book we read again and again. So I hope you enjoy today A Quiet Place, written by Douglas Wood and illustrated by Dan Andreessen. Sometimes a person needs a quiet place, a place to rest your ears from bells ringing and whistles shrieking and grown-ups talking and engines roaring and horns blaring and grown-ups talking and radios playing and grown-ups, well, even grown-ups need a quiet place sometimes. But it can be hard to find one. You have to know where to look. You could look under a bush, a lilac bush in your own backyard. When you crawl underneath it, all the sounds of the world seem soft and far away. And you can be a pirate finding buried treasure on a desert island. A bush could be your quiet place until someone calls you to clean your room. Then you could look in the woods. You might find an old stump for a chair or a mossy log for a couch in a green mansion of shadows and sunbeams. It's not really quiet, of course. Blue jays scream warnings and wind sings in the leaves, but it feels quiet. And you can be a timber wolf, the gray ghost of the forest. The woods could be your quiet place. But if the woods are too dark and deep, you could look by the sea on a beach in the early morning fog. Your footprints are the first of the day. The waves are roaring and the gulls are crying, but it doesn't seem noisy. The beach could be your quiet place. But if the beach is not your cup of tea, you could look in the desert, where Old Man Saguaro reaches for the sky and far off thunderheads bloom like sky flowers over mesas. A cactus wren drops by for a visit, while the horned toad blinks in the sun. The desert could be your quiet place. But if the desert is a bit too dry, you could sit by a pond. A heron by the shore stands still as a tree branch, and the water is so calm it looks like a mirror. Then a frog plops from a lily pad, and your face begins to wiggle. And you can be the world's greatest fisherman reeling in a monster catch. A pond could be your quiet place. But if the fish aren't biting, you could look in a cavern where every footstep echoes and the slow drip, drip of water builds new rocks that hang like icicles or stand like sculptures, where days and nights and weeks and years are all the same. And you can be a cave dweller in the lair of the saber-toothed tiger. A cave could be your quiet place. But if a cave is too cold and damp, you could climb to the top of the hill where clouds float by like ships or alligators or elephants. On a hilltop, you can see a long way and think long thoughts about how and what and why. And you can be a mountain climber on the top of the world. A hilltop could be your quiet place. But if your legs are too tired for climbing, you could wait for a snowy day and lie down in a snowdrift. All around you, the falling snow whispers, shh, and wraps the world in silence. If you listen closely, you can almost hear it breathing, a polar bear sleeping in a land where the snowy silence never ends. A snowdrift could be your quiet place. But if it's too warm for snowdrifts, you could visit a museum where brass tigers and bronze lions stand silent guard over fabulous treasures. Every painting is a magic window that your own imagination can open wide and climb through. And you can be an artist admiring your own masterpiece. A museum could be your quiet place. But if the museum is closed for renovation, you could go to a secret corner of the library where the only people talking are between the covers of books. They speak so softly, you can only hear them in your head. As you read about forests and oceans and deserts and caverns and museums and 1,000 other things, a library could be your quiet place. But if the library isn't open yet, you could come home and clean your room and read your own books and think your own thoughts and feel your own feelings and discover the very best quiet place of all, the one that's always there, no matter where you go or where you stay, the one inside of you. I hope you all have a special quiet place that you can escape to when the grown-ups are talking too much. And now, if you could join together in singing the children out, we're going to head up to the Matin building.
Our next hymn, number 352, Find a Stillness, is performed by Brian Kenny. Please stand as you're willing and able to sing 352, Find a Stillness. Now it is time for our morning offering. If your offering is for KUUF, please put it into the envelopes in the basket. Loose change, cash, or checks placed in the basket will go to this month's recipient of our charitable giving, Bremerton Backpack Brigade. If this is your first time at KUUF, you are our guest and there is no need to contribute. So let there be an offering to strengthen and sustain our community, which is sacred to so many of us. Let's enjoy a gift of music from Brian Kenny. Thank you, Brian. Now is the time for our joys and sorrows. When shared together, our joys are amplified and our sorrows lessened. We have several of them today. The first is from Kathy Money, a joy. I am in Arizona getting to know my grandson, Ethan. And one from a friend of KUUF who says, "My husband was recently diagnosed with a malignant invasive melanoma. After a wide excision and a lymph node biopsy, we just learned he is cancer-free and doesn't need any further treatment." And this is from Lena Hayek. "In remembrance of my dear friend and fellow KUUFer Sheila Worth, who passed away on July 20th, and whose memorial service is this afternoon in Indianola at 2 o'clock. And a joy from Rowan Brooke. Joy that my cousin and his family are visiting from Italy. My aunt and uncle can finally read to their young grandkids in person for the first time since before the pandemic." And this is from me, a concern for my brother and his family who traveled to the East Coast for the memorial service for my sister-in-law Barb's parents, long delayed because of COVID. Well, while there, most of the family came down with COVID and are waiting now in a Boston hotel till they can travel again. My brother and his wife are so far still negative, but it's still with us. This is from my husband, Mac Johnson. Ground Zero had a successful vigil and direct action at Bangor on August 8th. Several KUUFers were there and took part, including our new Reverend Crystal. And this is from Brian Watson. For my 19-year-old son's first driving lesson with my wife, Liz, yesterday. Such a joy to see him growing into a young man. And Reverend Carol has a special remembrance.
For those of you who receive the candle, last Friday, Robin Kreidler marked the upcoming one-year anniversary of her husband Peter's death by offering a reflection on his life by the Reverend Eileen Burdick, the hospice chaplain who ministered to Peter and his family as Peter neared the end of his life. Reverend Burdick offered her thoughts on Peter's impact on his family, his many students, and his community by reflecting on how he embodied compassion, service, determination, and integrity. Even as he neared death, Peter was compelled to speak out publicly for patient access to physician aid in dying. Following his terminal diagnosis of metastatic melanoma, he asked the local hospital and his personal physician about the option to use patient aid in dying, a right given to all Washingtonians in 2009 when voters approved the Death with Dignity law. When his request for access to physician aid in dying and referral to a palliative care specialist was denied by the hospital and his personal physician, Peter said, "I can accept the reality that faith-based institutions choose not to provide services for physician aid in dying, but it's unacceptable not to provide terminally ill patients with information or referral to someone who can. No one dying should suffer the burden of struggling to find access to this end-of-life choice when they are already suffering. This needs to change." Peter then turned to End of Life Washington for support. This organization identifies physicians in its network who would support Peter's choice. When Peter died on August 22nd, 2021, he did not exercise that choice, but he had the peace of mind knowing he had the option to die on his own terms. Peter's story about encountering the obstacles to access to the Death with Dignity option was widely publicized throughout the state and throughout the country, and his advocacy for the rights of all those facing that crucial decision on how they wished to leave this life, leave Peter's final legacy of service, determination, and integrity. Reverend Burdick, in her reflection, noted that Peter loved the image of trees and imagined his life as a nurse log, a tree that falls to the earth and becomes a source of life for all the new trees that springs from its compost on the forest floor. May Peter's life continue to nurture such hope and such love for others. May Peter rest in peace.
Thank you, Reverend Carol. And we light one last candle for those joys and sorrows that are still too tender to share. And please join me in a moment of prayer or intention. In the spirit of community in which we find strength and common purpose, we share our joys, our sorrows, our hopes, and dreams. We have turned our minds and hearts toward one another in trust, giving love, seeking comfort, and celebrating together. We are part of the web of life that makes us one with all humanity, one with all the universe. In the moments of our lives, for those loved ones and events shared this morning, and for those we yet hold in the silence of our hearts, we are truly grateful for the love and support of this beloved community. May the spirit of life and love bring peace to us all. Amen, and blessed be. Please remain seated as we sing Spirit of Life, hymn number 123 in our gray hymnal. There is no need to stand for this. For those at home, the words will appear on your screen. Reading number 1, Shabbat and the Suspension of Purpose, Rabbi J. Rosenbaum. A central goal of Shabbat is to detach ourselves temporarily from the meanings we have assembled during the week and train ourselves to hear pure sound. The core prohibition of Sabbath is meleket machshavet, work, which is an intentional goal, which has an intentional goal. On Shabbat, we temporarily suspend judgment and intention. We let go of purpose and meaning. Instead, we cultivate a state of mind of acceptance, openness, and non-directed attention. 6 days a week, we judge the world and ourselves and find them wanting. But 1 day of the week, Shabbat, we take a break from improving ourselves and everyone around us. We cast all judgment aside and engage in an act of radical acceptance. We are to imagine that the world is perfect as it is. On this day, we suspend all criticism of our loved ones, the world, and ourselves. Shabbat is a day to say to our husbands and wives, our children, our neighbors, and ourselves, in the immortal words of Fred Rogers, I love you just the way you are. The heart is a muscle. It expands and contracts. There is a time for gathering and a time of opening. The rhythm of Shabbat and weekday mimics the beating of the human heart. The weekdays are a time for ingathering, for concentrated energy, for determined intentional actions, for building. Shabbat is for attention, an opening of the mind and the heart. It is a time to stop building the tower and notice the people who are building it.
And our second reading is from the writer May Sarton. She writes, I always forget how important the empty days are, how important it may be sometimes not to expect to produce anything, even a few lines of a journal. A day when one has not pushed oneself to the limit seems a damaging day. A sinful day. Not so. The most valuable thing one can do for the psyche occasionally is to let it rest, wander, live in the changing light of a room. Let us pause now for a moment of reflection, followed by our post-reflection music.
Go lift it up, love bless your way, moonlight, starlight, guide your journey into peace and the brightness of day.
Go lift it up, love bless your way, moonlight, starlight, guide your journey into peace and the brightness of day. Go lifted up, love bless your way. Moonlight, starlight, guide your journey into peace and the brightness of day. Go lifted up, love bless your way. Moonlight, starlight, guide your journey into peace and the brightness of day.
Thank you, Ryan and Brian. 2 weeks ago, our area once again experienced record-breaking heat. I know personally I started going out for my morning walk much earlier in the day to avoid the later scorching sun. And as I walked, an old phrase that came to my mind, an old phrase that describes our hot summer weather, the dog days of summer. Now, of course, those words evoke images of panting dogs lying in a patch of shade or under the porch. And my cat, Stella, always wanted to demand equal time whenever the subject of dogs comes up. Reminds me that she, too, on exceptionally hot days, can sprawl in the shade just as well as any dog can. Well, on one of those hot, lazy days, curious about that origin of that term, dog days of summer, I Googled the term. And as always, Google offered more information than I really needed. But the expression comes not from observation of panting dogs, but from astronomy. The dog of dog days is Sirius, the brightest star in the constellation Canis Major, which means big dog in Latin. The Greeks and Romans, who provided the names and the mythologies surrounding our celestial phenomena, found that about the time Sirius, the dog star, appears alongside the sun, in other words, from mid-July to mid-August, the combined heat from the two stars made those days the hottest of the year. And I found one other little tidbit of Google data. In Greek, Sirius means the scorcher, a name we can appreciate this summer. So according to the ancients, the dog days of summer officially end this week. However, their invitation to metaphorically lie in the shade and do nothing productive is a wonderful reminder of the power of empty days. As May Sarton reminded us in the earlier reading, the most valuable thing one can do for the psyche occasionally is to let it rest, wander, live in the changing light of a room. Our culture respects, even worships productiveness, busyness. After all, who can rest when there is so much to do, juggling jobs, volunteer obligations, relationships, kids, social life, household tasks, and getting in, of course, those 10,000 steps a day? Well, our Western North American culture celebrates work and activity, even overwork and never taking time off. For many of us, vacations even become a challenge to see as many sights, drive as many miles as possible. Do you ever come home from a vacation feeling like you need a vacation from your vacation? So forgotten is the purpose of a vacation, which means to vacate or to empty. To step out of the usual routine, not substitute another kind of busyness. A vacation can be an opportunity to discover new ways of looking at the world. Sometimes we need to be reminded that slowing down does not mean that we are lazy, unproductive, or shirking responsibilities. Rather, rest, having time just to be, provides a time and space to wander, to restore both psyche and soul. We are, in fact, know that our bodies are programmed to respond to our need for rest. Like all living things, we are governed by circadian rhythms. We have physical and behavioral changes that respond to changes in light in our environment. In the natural world, we can observe flowers that close at night, birds that quiet their singing and return to roost as the sun sets. And as humans, we often feel the need to ignore our own circadian rhythms, signals that it's time to find the space for relaxation and restoration. In the world's faith traditions, time for rest, worship, and yes, prayer are fixed in religious calendars. In the book of Genesis and the Hebrew scriptures, we read of the first Shabbat, or Sabbath. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished and all their multitude. And on the seventh day, God finished the work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all the work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and hallowed it. So reads the book of Genesis. From the beginning, the importance of Sabbath was foundational in the Judeo-Christian traditions and to Islam. It is the fourth of the 10 Commandments. It reads, "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy." And the ancestor for many of us, the Puritans, they were really serious about that commandment. In 1671, the Massachusetts Bay Colony codified it in law with these words, that whosoever shall profane the Lord's day by doing unnecessary servile work, by unnecessarily prevailing, or by sports or recreations, he or thee that so transgress shall forfeit for every such default 40 shillings, or be publicly whipped. Well, although such severe enforcement of Sabbath eventually faded away, setting aside time for rest and renewal has still continued for Jews, Christians, and Muslims. Sabbath is meant to be a day of rest and prayer or reflection. And today, it might be a gift to ourselves to reclaim the meaning of Sabbath. Does that lawn really need to be mowed today? But pressures from commerce and convenience ensure that restrictions on work dictated in the past by religion have faded away, and each day of our week operates pretty much the same as the day before. But yet that need for Sabbath, for a day of rest, remains, and it's perhaps even more important than ever. As Alexandra Kovacs, my favorite seminary professor at Seattle University School of Theology and Ministry, wrote in a recent article, "We live in a world that is rapidly changing its social constructs and its norms, one that challenges the status quo. Our society is confronted with the reality of COVID-19, Black Lives Matter, Indigenous First Nations reconstructing an accurate, equitable, and holistic history of our world, just to name a few social shifts we are encountering. We are, in fact," says Alexandra, "experiencing socially what could be described as a big bang of social evolution." And these dramatic changes invite us to be more aware of the circadian rhythms in our bodies and in our minds, of the need to respect the tension between activity and rest, of the rhythm and pattern of the contraction and expansion we see in the natural world and in the deeper rhythm of our own lives. Rabbi Rosenbaum, whose words we heard earlier, writes, "The heart is a muscle. It expands and contracts. There is a time for gathering and a time for opening. The rhythm of Shabbat and weekday mimics the beating of the human heart. The weekdays are a time for ingathering, for concentrated energy, for determined, intentional action, for building. Shabbat is for attention, an opening of the mind and of the heart." These are indeed stressful times, as we all know, yet our lives expand and contract, expand and contract, expand and contract. We need that time for rest. We need that space for rest, to let go of the frenetic energy, the pace, the anxiety of these days. It may feel like an indulgence to our goal-oriented minds, but when we develop the habit of hitting the pause button, we can return to those tasks renewed and refreshed. Every time we spend significant time away from our usual tasks and responsibilities, we are offered an opportunity to grow in understanding of self and understanding of the universe around us. Lest you think that stepping away from the daily schedule is a waste of time, it can be very productive. It offers you time to be more aware of what is truly meaningful to you, to reevaluate ingrained habits, even beliefs that no longer work for you. The spiritual practice of taking time to rest can indeed be transformative. In his poem, Self-Care, James Cruz writes, "Some days it feels like a foreign language I'm asked to practice with new words for happiness, work, and love. I'm still learning how to say a cup of tea for no reason, what to call the extra honey I drizzle in, how to label that relentless urge to do more and more, to label it as useless, and how to translate the heart's pounding message when it comes, enough, enough. I'm learning to call this stillness self-care too, just standing here as goldfinches scatter up from around the feeder like broken pieces of bright yellow stained glass, reassembling in the sheltering arms of a maple." So what might self-care look like in our own lives? Watch the goldfinches or the nuthatches at the feeder. Take a walk, or if walking is not an option, just sit in your garden. Experience joy and beauty, listen to music, turn off the television, cook. Bring to mind the faces, the presence of loved ones no longer with you. Be still and breathe. Try just one or two of these practices and see how restful they can be. Then see, even if for a short time you feel happier, more relaxed, less worried, possibly even transformed. During these slower moments, I have found that gratitude slips in. Gratitude for life and all the love shared between and amongst us. Problems do not disappear, but they can be moved from the overwhelming file to a place that allows a more complete picture of life, the place that takes in the vastness of our world and our lives. I've always loved Mary Oliver's 3-line poem, Instructions for Living a Life. Pay attention. Be astonished. Tell about it. And perhaps that's all we really need to do on this Sabbath day. Pay attention, be astonished, and tell about it. So consider today's sermon permission to do absolutely nothing. Doing nothing can be the most fulfilling thing you will do today. And during these dog days of summer, sit in the backyard or on the deck or soak up the breeze and the sun. Forget about making lists or writing in a journal or even doing a prayer or meditation practice. Sometimes being still is one of the most difficult spiritual practices and also the most profound prayer we can do. But take my word for it, we really need it. And so may it be, and let us join together in our closing hymn, For All That Is Our Life.
So After the service today, please immediately exit through the foyer. You're encouraged to greet each other outside. Coffee and tea will be served outside as well in the breezeway between the two buildings and out on the place out there. Before our closing words, please be seated, though. The KUF board has a special announcement to make, and so I'd like to invite Ellie Klauminster up for that announcement.
Reverend Carol, last February you came into our lives here at KUUF in a new way. We had known you for years as a very welcome voice from our pulpit, but in February you took on a new role as our bridge minister. How fortunate we were to have such a good friend who knew us well, leading us over the last 6 months from a place of grief over our loss of our Reverend Jessica to where we are now, welcoming a new minister, Reverend Crystal. You led us over a bridge, step by step, with wise counsel, timely suggestions, and your lively, reassuring presence. You preached once a month, attended an enormous number of committee meetings, held regular office hours, led memorial services, and provided pastoral care to all of us simply by being here. The Board of Trustees, on behalf of the KUUF congregation, has commissioned our own Brian Watson to create a gift that expresses our deep and heartfelt appreciation for your services to KUUF. We all thank you very, very much.
And I thank you so much, everyone, KUUF. As I've told all of you, you hold a special place in my heart, and I especially value this lovely gift created by Brian Watson, our in-house wood artist. Thank you so much. Oh, and in the back is a debt to Reverend Carol McKinley and grateful appreciation for your friendship and service. From KITSAP Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, August 14, 2022. Thank you again. And now we'll have our closing words, and then you can retire to the breezeway for refreshments. These closing words, and as we extinguish our chalice, Judy, if you will do that, from Rainier Maria Rilke. I love the dark hours of my being. My mind deepens into them. There I can find, as in old letters, the days of my life, already lived and held like a legend and understood. Then the knowing comes. I can open to another life that's wide and timeless. Amen, and so may it be.